Government advisor Edward Lee and his wife, head teacher Denise, moved to a small village in Wiltshire in 1994.
We've now been here 20 years, which is longer than I've lived anywhere in one place, and they can bury me here.
Down on the compost.
Probably will.
For nature lover Denise, it was a dream come true.
We're just across the River Avon. This is the back of our house, looking onto my baby, this glorious garden. All this grass is wonderful habitat for butterflies and for their larvae. And that helps with my breeding programme in the summer.
Soon after they moved in, they expanded their property by purchasing a strip of land between them and the house next door. Running through the land was a public right-of-way. 10 years went by and Edward and Denise got a new neighbour. Edward went to introduce himself.
There was one gentleman on the JCB which turned out to be my neighbour next door. There was another gentleman there who was obviously a helper or workman. The workman came to me and just queried what I was doing, quite reasonably, and I said, look, I'm your neighbour. Is there anything I can do to help? My neighbour didn't say anything, and his colleague said, well, we're very busy, which they obviously were. Thank you for coming round, and I left. And I thought, this is great. I've got somebody here who's a real worker, who obviously wants to make something of the house, which can probably add value to my house. This could be really good.
A few months later, Edward had the opportunity to meet his neighbour properly.
There was a knock at the front door. I went to the front door. My neighbour and a business partner very politely asked me whether they could come in. So I invited them in and we came in here. They were very polite and said, would I be interested in selling the strip of land along there between my property and his? So I gave it a quick little thought and I said, well, no, I'm afraid I'm really not interested in selling. And he said, why not? And I said, well, I don't know what type of neighbour you are. I don't know if you've got barking dogs, screaming children or domestic rows. So I'm not prepared to sell. They were very polite and thanked me for my comments, left it almost immediately. And that was, as far as I was concerned, was the end of the matter.
But he was wrong. Soon after, the two men began to discuss the boundary between their properties.
At that time, the boundary was just bits of wire between posts and some wild hedgerow, which was totally unmanageable. So it was actually quite impossible to work out what the clear boundary line was between their property and our property. So when my neighbour's agent mentioned to us that the wall was going to be built there and the hedgerow would be taken out, it seemed to me a very good idea, as it would give us a proper boundary.
But as work began, something struck Edward as not quite right.
Well, when the wall started, I was watching it daily with total fascination because of the way the gentleman was working so hard. When it got to 6 feet from the front there, I thought, that's fine. That seems to be the regular height. Didn't take any notice. Then he put another layer on. I thought, that's a bit high. But then I thought, well, why make a fuss about it? You know, what's 6 inches between neighbours? And then all of a sudden I thought this wall's looking rather high because we knew the council requirement was a maximum height of 6 feet. And kind of watched it go, and then we watched it go and we thought there's got to be a limit to this, you know. The world high jump record is now being passed and it went above that and I was kind of in almost disbelief.
But his neighbour wasn't the only one with plans. The strip of land Edward had bought, which ran alongside his neighbour's new wall, falls on a public right-of-way and it needed levelling out. It was Edward's turn to call in the builders.
I invited my contractor and the local right-of-way warden on site to have a site visit so we all agree on the best way forward. And as we went towards the front and saw my neighbour next door, I thought, good opportunity to say hello to him, let him know what we're doing. I walked over and simply said, hello. At that point, Vesuvius erupted. They'd see if it wasn't for my age, he'd come over and he'd assault me on the spot. He's going to make my life a misery.
Coming up, suspicious smells in Glasgow.
It actually would have choked a horse, the smell.
Do I look like a major drug dealer to you?
And a fiery boundary battle in Bedfordshire.
I even put a smoke alarm near the front door, paranoid that he would firebomb the house.
For the past 20 years, this purpose-built block on the outskirts of Glasgow has been home to Isabel Ryrie.
When we moved in '95, we were the young ones, my husband and I. It was elderly people. We all got to sort of know one another. We were always there for one another, greeted one another, and that's the way it was.
Isabel is cared for each day by her daughter Karen.
I'm actually my mum's full-time carer. Because of that, I'm here on a daily basis. For a housing estate, it is a nice area. Quite friendly with the neighbours. If we see each other, we do say hello, and we are there for each other.
But when a new neighbour moved into the flat opposite Mrs. Ryrie, his mode of arrival raised a few eyebrows.
I was looking out the window one day, and I saw this man coming down the road with a small bookshelf and a wheelbarrow. And I thought, what's going on?
And when I went out and they were gone, it was quite hurtful. It really was.
We walked out to the landing and we were having a look. And then Mr. Pye came out of his house, and that's when I confronted him.
Next, the Ryries became alarmed at a new, more suspicious odour coming from their neighbour's flat.
When we first started smelling it, we thought, is the dog's damp or whatever? But then it was a mixture of smells. You know, it was the dogs, and unfortunately the person as well. But there was another smell which I didn't recognise, which my daughter did, and the police did.
The Ryries' new neighbour was about to face his first visit from the police.
I smoke cannabis. The police know I smoke cannabis. Housing know I smoke cannabis.
The small town of Kempston in Bedfordshire was a perfect location for Linda Bird to buy her dream home when she retired in 2013.
I wanted this area so I could do my father's family tree, because he was just born down the road. It's classed as Kempston Rural, which I liked, so just down the road there's fields and everything, so it should have been lovely.
And Linda had good first impressions of the neighbourhood.
I was befriended with an elderly couple 2 doors up that way in the first week or so. Absolutely lovely. It should have been great.
But within 2 weeks of moving in, Linda met another of her new neighbours.
I was coming up that way because I'd been down the shops and I saw my neighbour in the drive, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to introduce myself to him.
Linda's neighbour next door had lived there for 3 years.
I have actually apologised for the state of the conifers that were in the back garden, because I could tell they were very old, very out of control, and was damaging the wooden fence.
And Linda was surprised by his response.
Well, he said in a sharp, rude manner that anything my side of the fence was nothing to do with him, and it was hostile, and I couldn't understand why.
But Linda was soon dealing with more than just hostility. It wasn't long before she discovered her neighbour had a passion for home improvement.
Well, the noise that I used to experience nearly every day was DIY, and he used to work on the cavity wall, but it used to travel all along here. I mean, the noise went right up the walls. It was just awful. A hammer drill, power drill, you felt as if you just wanted to retaliate.
But drilling wasn't the only noise Linda had to put up with.
He also liked loud music, but you could only hear the bass thudding through the wall. Thump, 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 thump.
Her neighbour denies any wrongdoing, but Linda says she was forced to take drastic measures.
To be here with all the noise, it was so awful, and I couldn't hear the TV, so I started wearing these wireless headphones so I could at least hear what the characters were saying on the TV. Oh, Hawaii 5-0. Actually, I think the noise annoys me because it interrupts me and my best friend, which is my TV.
Linda didn't want to cause any trouble with her neighbour, but she had to do something.
It was starting to wind me up, and I decided to go round before I really got in a state. I went round and knocked on his door.
But her neighbour didn't want to talk about the noise, and he had a surprise for Linda.
He just come out with, "Your conservatory's on my property." And I must have said, well, I've only just moved in, so it can't be. I've had everything done properly.
Even so, Linda was troubled by her neighbour's accusation.
I came straight back in and phoned the solicitors who did my conveyancing and said, my neighbour has just accused me of having my conservatory on his land. To that, I was answered, there's nothing to worry about. Your boundaries are fine.
So Linda thought nothing more of her neighbour's comments. But one evening, a few days later, there was a knock at the door.
I was having tea in here, watching the TV, and I went round to open the door, and then I saw it was him, my neighbour, and he started talking about the conservatory again. And I said, well, go away and have a survey. Prove to me that my solicitors and my surveyor, when I bought it, did something wrong or missed something.
Linda heard nothing more for 2 months, but then one day in her garden, she got a nasty shock.
It would have been when I turned round to go back to the house that I saw the white mark painted on my house. He must have hung over the conservatory and painted this white mark.
A few days later, she received a letter from her neighbour's surveyor, saying that the white paint mark indicated the true boundary between the properties, and that her conservatory was encroaching onto his garden. But Linda disagreed, so confronted her neighbour.
And I said that whatever happens, he will be taking that white mark off my house. He mumbled something, and I said, you will take that off my house, and I think that's the best that I ever challenged him.
But what her neighbour did next would have Linda fearing for her life.
I even put a smoke alarm near the front door in case something come through the letterbox. Now that really does sound paranoid, but that's how I felt last year. That he would firebomb the house.
In Wiltshire, it was a wall built by Edward and Denise Lee's neighbour that was causing concerns.
This is what we eventually ended up with, a wall at least 8 foot high in parts, referred to by his own builder as the Great Wall of China, which is one of the most amazing walls that almost anybody's seen in Wiltshire.
And it hadn't taken long for things between Edward and his neighbour to turn ugly.
He told me that I wouldn't be living in this house in a year's time. He'd see if it wasn't for my age, he'd come over and he'd assault me on the spot. He didn't scare me. I didn't really think he was going to come around and assault me in front of 6 people. Secondly, he's smaller than me. I thought he was just trying to be a bully. He thought he was scaring me. He seemed quite surprised when I simply said, look, can we discuss this privately? And after I said it 3 times, he just marched off with his daughter and left the situation. Just very sad. I found then after that, whatever I'd say to him would result in a threat of some sort, so there wasn't much point.
The wall was completed despite a refusal of planning permission, and Edward wanted it removed. But when Edward started plans to level out his uneven strip of land, things got heated.
He said, you're not going to do an infill on your land. I said, excuse me, pardon? He said, you're not going to do an infill on that land. If you attempt to do it, I'll drop 30 tons of scrap metal in the drive and I'll stop the lorries coming in. Over the following years, there were numerous times whenever I was out in the garden, he would make himself unpleasant, come on site, make threats about moving gypsies onto my property, tell us that he was going to pollute the water in the spring, he was going to siphon the water off. All of these things were uncalled for. From our point of view, he was quite clearly waging a campaign to get us to move from this house so possibly he could buy the house and the land and redevelop it for profit. Well, there are reasons to move. So we were here first, and basically I'd be encouraging giving way to a thug. There's an American quote saying, evil prospers when good men do nothing.
When asked for his comments, the neighbour denied all allegations against him. But Edward and Denise were about to find out they weren't the only ones being threatened.
He was adamant that he would do everything he possibly could to stop any work.
Coming up, things get confrontational in Glasgow.
I called her a smelly tramp.
And the walls are closing in on Linda Bird.
I've never hated anyone in my life, but I do hate him.
When Linda Bird moved, her hopes of a quiet retirement were shattered. Her neighbour had lived there for 3 years, but had immediately staked a claim on what she believed was her property.
He proved to be nasty from day one. Arrogant, insolent, cocksure that he could do what he wanted. I was coming home from shopping and I have to come down this way. And I come round into the garden and I heard noises round the corner. So I ducked my head round here to find that the first section of fence had disappeared. Then it just slowly was taken down until at the bottom there was just no fence left. I started shaking, and at that point there's nothing for it but turn round and go in the house.
Moments later, Linda looked on in horror as her new neighbour began to saw down the line of conifers between the 2 gardens.
Slowly, all the conifers were down. I lost the fence and I lost the conifers, and I lived like that for a lot of months.
Linda called her solicitors, who made contact with her neighbour. He insisted that the conifers were on his land, and he claimed to have the surveyor's report to prove it. Feeling exposed and vulnerable, Linda retreated into the safety of her house.
I was convinced at first that if I pushed it, I'd get swiped.
And soon the garden became a no-go zone as her neighbour set fire to the pile of old conifers at the rear. According to Linda, the fire lasted for days. But once the smoke had cleared, her neighbour got back to work. Using the white paint line as a marker, he erected a brand new boundary fence. And Linda was far from happy with the results.
So I think he's 5-6 inches too far over my side. But that's what he's lined this fence up to, which means it cuts through my conservatory now.
Linda lost her privacy, so started using a blanket to cover the window.
This here is where he brought the fence up to. So he's implying that from this window upwards, so it looks like about 2 foot to me, is on his land and should come down. Well, if it wasn't so awful, it'd be funny.
But it was no laughing matter when Linda discovered the fence appeared to be a permanent fixture.
The fence posts are in big lumps of concrete that stretch into my garden. No one has to put a fence post 2 foot down in a mound of concrete that's about 4 foot circular.
This was the moment Linda decided she would take no more.
If he hadn't have put that fence right in front of my conservatory, I'd have given in. But because the fence is there, I have to fight it.
So Linda called her solicitors, who asked her neighbour to remove the new fence. But her neighbour refused, which angered Linda even further.
I wouldn't spit on him if he was on fire. That is how I feel about him. There isn't a swear word strong enough.
And Linda is convinced her conservatory should stay where it is.
I've been told by the conservatory company that I should fight it because it's been there since 2003 and ownership is 10 years.
So Linda decided to take her neighbour to court, claiming damages and demanding the original boundary be reinstated to how it was when she moved in. But her neighbour has fought back.
He's countersuing me, saying that this part of the conservatory is on his property and I should either buy the land that it's on or take the conservatory down.
For Linda, the stress of warring with her neighbour has taken its toll.
I hate him. I mean, I've never hated anyone in my life, but I do hate him. It's the worst thing I did coming here.
Linda is currently awaiting a court date. But win or lose, her retirement dream in Kempston appears to be over.
If he wins, I can't sell because I'll still have that fence near the conservatory. And if I win, I'm off. Off out of Kempston, probably out of Bedford, out of Bedfordshire.
In Glasgow, Isabel and Karen Ryrie had quickly grown suspicious of their eccentric new neighbour.
We started to see exactly what kind of person he is. This man has no concept of consequence. He has no respect for people's boundaries. He has no respect. It's what he wants to do and nobody is to tell him what to do.
John Tyre had been housed in the block by the local housing association.
They told me I'd love it round there, it'd be peace and quiet. I did love it, at first.
Despite the Ryries' complaints, John was still living with 2 dogs and a family of nesting rabbits.
So you got a wee little whiff, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't as though you could smell it out the close, but when I opened the door, you got a wee little whiff because it was near the front door.
The smell was absolutely horrendous. It was like a dirty dustbin times 10. It actually would have choked a horse, the smell.
They even accused me of being a major drug dealer. Do I look like a major drug dealer, do you?
He'd have people coming to visit him all day of the night. And I'm sorry to say it, but they weren't the best calibre of people. And sometimes it'd be 12 o'clock at night. And they'd stay for 5-10 minutes and they'd go again.
They're phoning the police, telling the police that I have substantial quantity of drugs on me, on my possession. The police come out, search me in the street, yeah? I get degraded in the street because they're searching me. They find nothing on me.
The police took no further action. But when Karen complained about one of John's dogs and it was taken away from him, things got ugly.
Why should anyone have to get rid of an animal just because people make up stories? Listen, I care more for animals than I do for people. As far as I'm concerned, you can get every human that there is, yeah, put them up against the wall, shoot them, and just leave all the animals. No one takes anything out on my dogs. Worst thing to do. That really upsets me.
The doors would get slammed off its hinges. It was total intimidation all the time.
And at Christmas, things took a turn for the worse.
That is when all hell broke loose. Now, ever since my mum has stayed here, at Christmas time, she has decorated the landing with Christmas decorations.
I don't celebrate Christmas, right? I've got nothing against anyone that does, yeah, but that time of the year ain't a good one for me. I treat it just as a normal day.
After putting out her mother's Christmas decorations on the landing, Karen noticed some were missing.
They come hammering on my door, accusing me of stealing a Father Christmas that you can get from a gift shop for 50p.
And his words to me were, "What you coming to me for? I ain't done anything." And he slammed the door that hard in my face, I thought he'd taken the door off its hinges.
The police were called, but no action was taken. 2 days later, the row flared up again.
9 o'clock, we'd only just got up. Here we hear him on the landing. "I'll burn this landing down if they don't move these Christmas decorations." So I said to my mum, "No, I'm phoning the police."
The Ryries called the police again. This time, John was arrested and held for an alleged breach of the peace, but was released without charge. The battle between the Ryries and John Tyre was now to spill out onto the street.
I was coming out my mum's gate, walked towards the car, got in the car. It was raining, I had my window down, I was wiping my wing mirror, and I saw him coming down from that direction. He stood at the gate, turned round and started shouting at me. He walked up that garden path, he stood at that door, he turned around and started shouting at me.
And I called her a smelly tramp.
And again, I know I shouldn't have because I don't use foul language. But I was so angry. He started running down that garden path, frothing at the mouth.
I went, "You better do yourself a favour," I went, "and you better off."
"I'll smash your face in," and his fist was like this. Luckily, I rolled my window up and that stopped him for some reason. He turned around and he walked back in the close. I was terrified. I actually felt terrified. I thought, this is it. This man's going to kill me. That was the look on his face, with such venom and hatred. And I went up to my mum's house and I phoned the police.
Do you know I'm the one that got arrested?
This time, John pled guilty in court to verbal abuse and was admonished for it, the lowest level of punishment possible in Scottish law. But he was next to face more serious allegations.
I knew it was going to end up in assault because this man was determined he was going to hurt me somehow.
the job. But it wouldn't be long before the neighbour heard about it.
Yeah, I was working in Trowbridge the first time he came and threatened me. Next minute, I get a phone call from our office saying he's in here shouting and swearing, banging the counter and being generally abusive and threatening. He wanted to know where I was, so I told him, I'd tell him where I am. You know, I'm not worried about him. Tell him where I'm working. And he turned up there with, I think it was 3 chaps. I got off the digger and I said, well, what's your problem? He came right into my face. The other 3 surrounded me, and I'm sure that they would have attacked me. As it was, my son was there with me, and my son being what he is, he wasn't scared of 3 blokes or Lippy or anybody, you know. I told him I was not going to stop. I was going to fill it in. It's nothing to do with him. It's private land, not his land. Leave me alone.
It was really the first time that we had felt supported.
I will not be threatened by this man. He's a bully, and that's all he is. He thinks he's above the law. I gave Edward my word. I'm a man of my word. I will finish that job.
But work was far from easy.
I've had continual threats right the way through. He's a lunatic. I cannot get a contractor to come there. Every time I get a contractor to come there, he threatens them, and they just pull out. They won't tip in there. I just had to fill it up as and when I could get spoiled myself. It's just taken so long. It's obviously cost a lot more money. It's ridiculous.
Kenny said if he had to carry the earth in on his own, a hod at a time to fill the earth in, he'll do it.
While Kenny worked on the land, Edward's thoughts returned to the wall, and he decided to commission his own land survey report.
When I got the maps inside this report, it showed quite clearly the extent of the encroachment of my land from the beginning of the garage at the front all the way 200 feet down to the end of my property. I was incredulous when I found out that the wall was substantially on my property. The biggest problem being, of course, that when I want to sell my land in the future, I can't sell it because I don't have possession of the land. So I just put the matter in the hands of my solicitor, sent a copy to the council, and asked them to act accordingly.
But while he waited, the troubles with the neighbour continued.
I came out of the house to put some rubbish into the bin. As I came through the gateway, I noticed silly images on the wall.
Edward had already started plans to fence off the public right-of-way.
Once the fence was up, we were somewhat relieved in that we actually began to feel that our land was actually ours. And we were looking forward to the rest of the fencing being up and then having the privacy that we thought we'd bought when we bought the land.
But it wouldn't take long before the fence caused a whole new set of problems. Coming up, contractor Kenny stands his ground.
I would have beat his brains in.
And neighbours come to blows in Glasgow.
If he sees me, something's going to happen.
Edward and Denise claim to have endured years of abuse from their neighbour. Abuse that included a threat of violence, an alleged theft of land, and the construction of a 200-foot-long, 8-foot-high concrete wall. To mark out the public right-of-way, the couple had a fence put up, but it wasn't long before they noticed it had been tampered with.
So I ran the CCTV that I had installed on a previous act of vandalism, and lo and behold, there's only one person who appears at 8 o'clock, looking like one of Snow White's little friends, and who looks around to see if anybody's there, then goes up the right-of-way. And I've timed it. He goes in and comes out again 9 minutes later. That's about 2 minutes to go up there, a few minutes to rattle some posts, then comes out. As soon as I reported the apparent damage to Kenny, he came out on site with the fencer. And while they were looking at it and making comments about it, they looked up and saw him at his window, laughing and gesticulating at them, making it quite clear that he thought the whole thing was highly funny and it was a source of great amusement to him.
It is obviously him that went down there at night and pushed the post over. He still carries on hassling us. It's the way the chap is. He thinks he's above the law and he thinks he's untouchable. And he clearly isn't.
I was not surprised.
In Glasgow, John Tyre had been feuding with his neighbours the Ryries for over 2 years. After a catalogue of allegations about his animals, drugs and aggressive behaviour, the Ryries heard what they thought was good news.
The housing has said to us, when we asked if he was moving, yes, Mr Tyre asked to be moved because he wasn't happy with what was happening.
With John still visiting and doing shopping trips for his elderly former neighbours downstairs, relations between Karen and John were at breaking point and emotions were running high.
If he sees me, something's going to happen. Something will happen because he's not normal.
And in February 2014, things came to a head.
I walked down the garden path of my mum's home to the gate, came out the gate, turned round, was closing the gate. Went out the corner of my eye, I saw Mr Tyre. He rushed over from here and he came rushing over and he did this. He pushed me with his body on my side and I did this. And I mean, he's quite a tall, strong guy. And I nearly fell. I got such a shock. Again, I was frightened. That was my reaction because it was like he'd moved, we'd been assured that he was told to behave himself, and yet here he was assaulting me in the street again.
I had 2 big bags of shopping, right? And actually, she hit me with a gate when I tried to go through the gate. She broke the woman's eggs that I was going shopping for. I was more worried about the eggs than me getting damaged with the gate.
It's the first time he'd actually touched me physically, yeah.
She told the police. I shoved her on her shoulders, pushed her on the bonnet of the car. That's why I was arrested.
In September 2014, John Tyre was found guilty of assault by the Glasgow Sheriff Court. He awaits sentencing. Next time, some neighbour disputes never end, they just get worse. In the Cotswolds, they're on a collision course.
The engine was racing. She proceeded to drive straight towards Richard.
In London, the writing's on the wall. And where are they now? 2 nuisance neighbours who made themselves notorious.
And this music is not going to stop ever. You get me?